From Orlando, Florida and Tulsa, Oklahoma, welcome to the 1330 Podcast with your hosts, Keith Neighbor and Brent Bailey. Pulling from nearly half a century of experience, Brent and Keith share unique wisdom and proven insight to build the leader within you. Interact with us now on Facebook and Twitter at 1330 Podcast or email your questions and comments to 1330podcast@gmail.com. The 1330 Podcast starts right now.
Well, we'd like to welcome you guys to the 1330 Podcast. My name's Keith Neighbor.
I'm Brent Bailey.
And we'd like to thank you guys once again for taking time out of your busy schedules to
hitting the download button.
That's right, and listening to what we've got to say. We're covering leadership issues kind of on all levels of life, going through church, business, family, ministry type things. And last time we were together, we were talking about people that we aren't necessarily the highest capacity leaders. We kind of coined the term no star as opposed to the all-star, or utility players, so to speak. And we were talking about the parable of the talents, where we end up with a lot of people. You know, everybody wants the 5 talent guys because they're the high capacity people, but 2/3 of your people, Brent, are going to be 1 and 2 talent people. And we're going to need to develop those people. And one of the issues that we run into with the 1 talent people is trying to convince them that they can do more than they think that they can do, and that we give them the opportunity to use their talent and not just bury it. Because so many times we look at the person, the 5 talent or the 2 talent person, with eyes of envy because they're better than we are. They seem to have everything together and they're more organized, and they just have, really in our eyes, they just have it all together, and they've got way more ability than we do. And we think that we could never accomplish what they accomplish. So as a result, we don't do anything. And our job as a leader, in my opinion, is to come in and find those 1 talent people and get them to use what God has placed on the inside of them. And you said it earlier, you said it in our last podcast, to look beyond what they are and who they can be. So if we can start looking at people like that, we're going to become developers of people, and that we're going to move them from being the 1 talent person to the 2 talent person. And we're going to take those 2 talent people and take them from 2 talent to 4 talent people. And as we start to do that, we're going to start to see our organization grow, Brent.
It starts with something that was taught to us by a really good friend of ours. Most likely is listening today. Out in the Phoenix Sun, our good friend, buddy, Dave Vasquez, actually taught a lesson to our leaders at one of our retreats that we were doing. And he talked about this very story, but the 1 talent guy said to the master, I knew you to be a hard man.
Yep.
And so I got scared and buried my talent. And the master looked at him, and here's the part that I really want to get to. He called him a wicked and lazy servant. Now, we automatically think wicked like a witch or something like that. But that word wicked actually means twisted.
Yep.
Where we get our word Wiccan, or Wicca. Wicker, sorry. I knew it was going to be there somewhere. Wicker, as in furniture, which means twisted, things twisted over top of each other. Which, if you're going to deal with people that are non-star, here's the first thing you got to understand is they automatically are going to think a lot different than you.
Yes.
Most likely in the wrong direction.
Yes. They make big assumptions about you that are not true.
Right. But they're going to look at the same job and what your level of success is, and what, like, if I do this job, what comes out of that job, my idea of success looks like this. Theirs is going to look way different. So instead of just jumping in and releasing them, you have to understand that those people think differently than you do, which means you're going to have to take some time to help change their thinking, to really help them think about things a little bit differently. I got a guy in my church right now, and we have conversations all the time, and he'll finish a thought out and say something to me, and I'm like, huh? What? And I wasn't even close to that.
Right.
And sometimes it's frustrating, and you kind of go, no, I'm not there. But if you understand that you're really trying to progress people, you can't get mad for them being where they are right now, because obviously that's why they're there.
We were there at one point.
We absolutely, in some areas, we're still there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I have other people that go to my church that are 5, if not 50 talent people. You know what I mean? They're
right.
You know what?
Sharp.
Really sharp. And when it comes to them talking to me about certain areas in my life, I have to just shut my mouth and listen. I'm at a place now where I know they know more than me.
Yep.
So I'm going to shut my mouth and listen to that. But when it comes to coaching people who are lower talent than you have to understand that too, and give them a minute to learn and think differently. And that's not always something that's easy to do, to start thinking differently.
It's a difficult task. I've had the opportunity to be around some really successful business people recently, and I had a conversation with one. The guy's a multi-millionaire, and he made a statement about he started his first business when he was 19 years old. He moved out of the house. His dad told him that he was never going to amount to anything. He was never going to accomplish anything, and he went out and bought a bunch of equipment and started a company. And now he's, on the verge of retiring, as I said, just as a multi-millionaire. Even though he's on the verge of retiring, he's still is buying up businesses and doing things. And he bought a business recently and said, I did more in sales my first 60 days of having a company than this other guy had done in the previous year. He told me the company wasn't, it had just topped out, and he was doing as much business as he could. There just wasn't enough business in this town in order to make this business more successful. And he said, all I did was went out and looked for a little bit of business. He goes, I'm not even trying right now. And through the conversation of it, this guy thinks differently than I do.
Yeah.
He's a risk taker, and he's not afraid of failure. The thing that I have noticed about people that are highly successful, they're not scared of failing. And the thing that I've realized, those 5 talent people, so to speak, even 2 talent people, but 1 talent people have a great fear of failure. And the only way that they step out of that fear of failure is through giving them small baby steps to take, where they are able to succeed and see success in their own life. And they actually require a lot more encouragement than the 5 talent and 2 talent people do to actually go out and do something, because they live in fear that when they make a mistake, we're going to beat them down. And if we come in when they do make a mistake and we really put a beat down on them, then we've ruined them. And now they're just going to bury their talent from that point on with us, because their thought of us as being as a hard person, as a hard leader, a demanding leader, has just been fulfilled in their life, that we can't be pleased.
Yeah.
But that's not true. We can be, and we just have to we can't allow our frustration with their pace to overtake us and become frustration. This is where the fruit of the Spirit really has to come into play in our lives, where we've got a love for them and we've got a joy in watching them, walk that path and go on that journey. And we've got that patience, in order to allow them to grow into who they're going to become.
Yeah.
And if we allow that to happen, man, we could end up with some of the greatest people ever, because our leadership team, my leadership team, was made up of people that really grew into who they were. It took some time with some of them to grow into it, but boy, once they got their feet underneath them and they got some confidence, boy, there was really no stopping them. They went out and they were coming up with ideas, and really great ideas, and they started out as 1 talent people.
The other thing that 1 talent people will bring to the table is they will, now whether they believe the right thing or not, they will believe easier wholeheartedly in the group, in the organization. They believe a whole lot more about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Than a 5 talent, they may or may not need what you're doing. I mean, they do need what you're doing, but they can kind of leave it or take it. Like, well, okay, if that's the way it's going to be, I'll just
go somewhere else. Yeah.
Right. Where a 1 talent person looks at what you're doing and they're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, this is great. I'm going to, and you may be going, you really can't add to what we're doing. On the surface, that may be the case, but you know what? You get enough folks like that to believe in what you're doing. That's a mighty moving force.
Yeah.
To coin an old song from the 80s. And look at who Jesus picked to be the guys that took the gospel message to the rest of the world. One-talent guys. Fishermen.
Yep. Tax collectors.
Normal, average Joes who, if you study anything about Jewish history, they all wanted to be priests when they were growing up, and they all were rejected.
Yep.
All guys that had to pick the secondary career for Jewish little boys. And here he comes and says, why don't you follow me? All of them were one-talent guys.
But he gave them purpose when he did that. Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men.
Yeah. And he said, the old saying that when a priest would pick candidates, because by the time Jewish boys were 5, they had to have, the Old Testament memorized, or at least the first 5 books of the Old Testament memorized. And then that testing went on throughout their whole life. And by the time they were 16 or 18, that's when they were picked to go and become, follow a priest. And you understand, priest, we're not talking about Catholic priests. We're talking about the Old Testament priests. And these guys the priest would come and say, okay, I want you to follow me. And basically, you're going to go to school. But instead of going to university, you're going to follow this priest around and you're going to do everything he does. He's going to basically teach you everything he knows. Well, that was called taking the yoke upon you. And that's why Jesus used that phrase to those guys.
Yeah.
Take my yoke upon you.
Yeah.
That's a pretty awesome thing when you think about it, because Jesus looked into the heart desire that those guys had and spoke their language, right? He called them fishermen and used the word yoke.
Yeah.
Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Take my yoke upon you. He's speaking right to their situation where they are. And that would be the question that we want to ask you as leaders today is, how well do you really know your one-talent people? I mean, are you familiar with their people, the world that they live in? Do you just want everybody to think like you and be like you? Or are you taking the time to learn something about those people's world in order to make room for an investment that you're wanting to make in them so that they can rise up and be what they're supposed to be?
Well, and the people that you need, for the most part, are already in your midst. They're already in your church. We're praying for all these other places and the things that we need. Well, they are there. We just have to develop them, and we've got to bring those gifts out. When I first started in ministry as a volunteer, we had a kid that wanted to be the sound guy, and he was always back there messing around with sound stuff, and he wasn't good. He owns a huge company that puts sound systems in churches all over the nation right now. And it started out working with the youth group, doing sound, learning the ropes and being taught and making mistakes and messing things up. And through all of that, he developed, and he went from being a 1-talent to a way beyond a 5-talent individual. He's an expert in his field now. And it all started out, he was developed in the body of Christ in a local church.
Well, listen, we're just about out of time. We'd love to sit and talk about this a little bit longer, but the 1330 has just about passed. Make sure you send us some emails. We want to hear from you. Answer some of your questions. 1330podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Brent Bailey.
And I'm Keith Neighbor. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for the 1330 Podcast with Brent and Keith. We want to hear from you. Find us on Facebook and Twitter today at 1330 Podcast or email us directly at 1330podcast@gmail.com. Join us next time for another 13 minutes and 30 seconds geared to change you into the leader that you and those who follow you want you to be.